What's up, YouTube? Robbie Vapes back again, and today we are checking out the Hohm record G2 by Hohm Tech. So stay tuned. That's right, YouTube. Today we are checking out the Hohm record G2 by Hohm Tech. And this review is actually over a month in the making. Not necessarily the recording of it, but I've actually spent over a month with this device. And the reason being, I really wanted to make sure I got a good feel for this device so I could provide you guys the absolute best, bare minimum pros and cons, overviews, maybe some Easter eggs, dry burn tests. And then I started thinking, after putting all that together, I said, you know what? I don't think it's right to put that all in one video. So this is basically the basic review portion of it. If you want to see the dry burn test, it will be in a separate video. If you want to see some Easter eggs, they will be in a separate video. This is just a bare bones review right now. Whether or not I recommend it, what all the hype is about, does it work, does it not work? And again, like I said, we'll get into the actual dry burn test in a separate video, but I will tell you my results in this one. And then if you want to see it for yourself with your own two eyes, that video will be for that purpose. So with that being said, let's start with the very basic question. And that's a question that everyone has on their mind, and I'm not even going to try and delay it at all. I'm not going to try and put it at the end of this video. Let's just get it out in the open. Does this device do temp control? Specifically, Kanthal and nichrome temp control? Yes. Is it finicky? Sure. It's a little finicky, guys, okay? If you're looking for a temp control Kanthal where it's simple, it's at your fingertips, you hit a button and all of a sudden you're done and you can have the best Kanthal temp control of your life, don't expect this or, quite frankly, any other device to do that for you. This device, what it does do, however, is it does do Kanthal. If you're interested in tinkering a little bit, maybe playing around with the device a little bit more, getting into the nuts and bolts of it kind of thing. Figuratively speaking, of course, do not try and get into the nuts and bolts of this device. I'm just talking about basically if you like to play around with the devices and if you like to have a lot of hands-on work with your devices, this is going to be for you. And I think if that's the type of person you are, you like to play around with it a lot, then you're probably going to like Kanthal temp control because there's a lot of playing around with it involved. Now, as far as all the issues and all the things that people have been saying about this device, I will address those as we go through the video, but I want to start with the very basic pros and cons of this device that I have personally felt. Now, I may be missing a few things here and there, but this is just based on my personal experience. These are things that came up in my everyday experience and nothing more. This wasn't me trying to overwork the device, and it wasn't me trying to be too nitpicky with it either. That being said, though, my two cons are pretty nitpicky. The first con I have, and we're going to start with cons like I normally do, the first con I have is the shape of the device. And again, you'll see it in the up close section, but you can see along here, the edges are, I wouldn't say they're sharp, but they are sort of uncomfortable. And for me, if you're holding your device in here in your hands for a very long period of time, it does get to be a little bit uncomfortable. It's being nitpicky. Honestly, all it needs is like a rubber sleeve or something to go in it or to go over top of it, and it would be perfectly fine. It's just a little bit tight and the corners are just a little bit too sharp for my liking. But again, is it a deal breaker? Hell no. I mean, this is just being picky, guys. The second one I want to talk about, and this is actually not my con. I know I just mentioned how I talked about I'm only going to do my experience, but I actually asked a lot of people who I've been hanging out with at the vape store recently about this device, and I wanted to see what their thoughts were on the price point. The price point is $140 US, give or take, $5 kind of thing here or there, but it's $140 US. A lot of people are saying it's overpriced, and I put it as a con. I put the price point as a con for that reason, but at the same time, I think there's something you have to talk about here that never gets talked about in the vape industry. For us, value is seeing a device that's cheaply priced. For example, a $50 device versus, in this case, a $140 device. Which one's better, right? Well, obviously, the better value is $50 price. But I think value, when we define it, it's something we don't really talk about too much. And to me, value isn't just the price of the device. Value is how much are you getting out of that device for the price. And also, one thing we never talk about is markups. And this is just pure spitballing here, guys. This is just purely speculation. I cannot confirm this or any of these things, but I want to give you guys an example. You have brand A. Again, we're not going to use any actual names here. You have brand A which is retailing for $100, but it only costs $30 to make. That means you're making $70 profit off you, okay? Then you have brand B. For argument's sake, let's say it's $150, but this one costs $95 to make. So they're making $55 off you, which is a better value. A lot of us would look to the $100 one saying it's cheaper, it must be better value. But in a lot of cases, the $150 one, in my eyes, would be the better value because you're getting more out of it and the company is actually taking less out of your pockets at the end of the day. Now, I'm not saying companies should be in it to make a profit. Obviously, that's ridiculous. But what I am saying is that when you have a device that is priced a little bit higher, but what you're getting out of that device meets the higher price tag and it's justifiably priced higher, I think that's when you have to look at it and say, you know what, maybe I do get this device or device B over device A and spend the extra $50 because I feel like I'm getting more value out of it. Now, all that rambling, of course, kind of is a bit of a moot point, but at the same time, it is relevant. And I'll tell you why it's relevant. I personally believe that the quality of this device, materials, feature sets, the chipset, is all justifiably priced at $140. Now, this is just purely based on my opinion. I cannot tell you how much they make off each device. I don't know their markups. I don't know their profit margins. All I know is that, to me, I will say it does feel worth the $140 price tag. Now, is it still a con? Again, it's subjective. It's up to you. Do you want the brand A, or do you want this one? And that's a question you have to ask yourself. So, with that being said, let's move on to the pros. The first pro I have is the high-end finish. It is a very nice finish. You'll get to see it in the up-close section here in just a bit, but it's got a very nice deep engraving around the outside of the device. The battery plate is super sturdy. I have no scratches on it. I haven't really dropped it too much, but I definitely haven't really been babying it either. It's been, bouncing around my backpack all over the place, hitting other devices, things like that. It hasn't shown any signs of wear. I've had it for probably about 6 or 7 weeks now, actually, almost 2 months. And I think that given the durability of it and the durability of the finish itself, not just the actual metal, but the finish, the paint job, it stood up really well in my mind, so I have to give that a pro. The next pro I have is the chip itself, which is loaded with features, including several Easter eggs, like I said before, which I'll talk about in a separate video down the road, because I'm not even sure I've found them all yet. But anyways, so a bunch of Easter eggs, little things here and there, and that's, the chip is part of it, but there's other Easter eggs that I've found that have nothing to do with the chip, but I will say this, I do like the chip, and I do like the menu system, and just how easy it is to navigate. You know how I am. I love a very simple, easy to navigate menu system. Moving on, Canthal temp control and Nichrome temp control. For a lot of people, it's a pro. And again, does it work? Yes. Is it a little bit finicky? Sure. But again, it's a trade-off, okay? And like I said before, does it work? Yes. Are there any other devices that are even close to this yet? As of this recording, no. By the time you watch this, maybe this is a month down the road, maybe this is 6 months down the road. I can't say for sure justifiably if there's going to be anything else in Canthal temp control. I've heard rumors that other companies are working on it, but obviously the first to market usually wins. And of course, they've had a ton of ways to update their chip as well. And that's the other thing I want to talk about is the update port. They do have an update port on this. The port in here is underneath the battery cover, so it's not in plain sight, and you're not going to mistake it for a charging port, hopefully. But again, that goes back to my point. This is not a charging port in here, and you'll see that in the up-close section as well. I like the location of the update port. I like the update port. It's a little bit finicky to get to the update because you have to turn things on and go through the menu settings, but it's pretty simple to navigate anyways, like I said, so it's not too bad. So speaking of the battery template and the battery plate and the battery cover, well, let's talk about the battery sled. And this is a big deal for me, okay? It's the little things that get this device as high up in my rankings as what it gets. And the truth is the battery sled, the one best thing about it is it doesn't chew up my battery wraps, which is fantastic. So many of those dual 18650 mods are just eating up my battery wraps, and this is one that actually fits the batteries comfortably while still having, very little wear on them as well. So I did want to get to that as well. Now, the last pro I have is actually a big one in my books, and that is the additional button they've given it. These guys went outside the box. Instead of the traditional 3-button layout, your fire button, up and down button, they added a 4th button. And I know there's other devices that have 4 buttons, But this one did it right, I think. In my opinion, it's located perfectly. It's just above the firing button, so my thumb can still reach it back and forth. That is also the on-off button to turn the device on and off. Hold the button down for 4 seconds, and if you're turning it off after you've held it down 4 seconds, you will have to click it twice more to confirm your off power. Again, we'll see all that in the up-close section, but just wanted to mention that. Now, as far as the actual button goes, what is it used for? It's used for navigating the menu system very easily. It's used for accessing the Insanity menu, which we'll get to in the up-close section. And it's used for the power on and power off, which I just mentioned. Now, for me personally, I don't understand why companies are so afraid to add more buttons to their devices. Call me a button guy if you will, but I don't care if a device has 10 buttons. One for nickel, one for titanium, one for stainless, one for Kanthal, one for wattage mode, one for mech mode. Give me as many buttons you can fit on there, okay? Because if it's just one-click button, give me a button for locking as well. That's the other thing. If I want to lock the device, give me a lock button, you know? The iStick 100 watt, for example, has a lock button on it. I haven't tried it yet. I don't know if it works, but I know it actually has a dedicated lock physical button on it, or physical switch, I should say. And that is awesome. I really wish more companies would embrace the buttons. So, bit of a side ramble there, but you get my point. Apart from that, I think that's all I want to talk about in the pros and cons section. Again, you know, let's get into the down and dirty section. I will save the dry burn test for later on in a separate video and give it its own video so you can easily look it up. And I will do dry burn tests on nickel, titanium, Kanthal, stainless steel, and even nichrome if I can get my hands on some. I don't have any at the moment, but I'm sure I can get some. So again, it's going to be a massive dry burn test in a separate video. Down and dirty with the Hohm Wrecker G2 by Hohm Tech. That's right, YouTube. We are now down and dirty with the Hohm Wrecker by Hohm Tech. Here's the packaging very quickly here, so we can see just all around it. Very nice packaging, very simple as well. Once we open the box up, we are immediately greeted with the mod itself. Taking the mod out, you also have some user manuals in the back here. Put that off to the side. Put the mod off just right here for a second. Here you have the user manuals. You also have like a warranty and a notice card. And then tons of stuff in here that you're going to want to read. Believe me, there's a lot to this chip. So that's what you get with it. There's the warranty card I mentioned as well. But I'll put that off to the side really quickly. And let's just get to the device itself. So right now, as we can see, it is powered on. And to power this off, all we have to do is hold this down for 4 seconds. While I'm holding it down, just 4 seconds, confirm power off, press mode 2 times, and that's this button right here. So once I get to that screen, I hit it 2 times and it'll turn off. To turn it back on, I just hold it down for 4 seconds and it turns back on. There's no need to hit any more buttons than that. Also, to lock the device, this is if you don't want to vape it, or if you just don't want it to vape on it or whatever, you're putting it in your pocket or in your car or something, and you just want to be safe, all you have to do is hold the up and down button together for about 3 seconds and it's now locked. To unlock it, same thing. Up and down button, it's now unlocked. Now we'll lock it again and I'll show you how to, and I'll just prove that you can actually fire it in this mode. So it's locked. Let go back to the main screen. There we go, and locked. And that's me hitting the fire button. So it will not let me do that while it's locked. Now that it's unlocked, let's actually cycle through the menu itself. Let's start with the Insanity menu. Actually, you know what? Let's get the Insanity menu for last. Let's go with the very simple menu here. So the very first thing we're going to do to scroll through modes is hit this mode button 3 times. 1, 2, 3. We now have the option to choose nickel, titanium, or stainless. 1, 2, 3. Now we have the vape porn mode, which allows us to choose from Kanthal, nichrome, which I think is actually underappreciated on this. I feel like nichrome should have had almost as much attention as Kanthal did, and everybody's kind of just ignoring it. Anyway, so you have Kanthal, nichrome, and Pornhub mode. Just kidding. The triple X is just your own metal, so it should actually read your own metal in there, which is going to be interesting because I know there's a lot of talk about platinum wire right now, and I'd be very curious to know if they could actually program platinum wire in here. That would be interesting. But anyways, going back 3 more clicks in the mode, and we're now back to digital watt menu. Going into here, we're going to go into the Kanthal mode here, and 3 more clicks. There we go. So again, we're going to go to Kanthal here. I'm going to show you a little trick if my camera can actually focus on this thing. There we go, a little better. To select it, just hit the power button. All right, so we're now in Kanthal temp control, as we can see. I'm going to turn that down a little bit, go to 500 degrees. I'm going to put a tank on this, and I'll be right back and show you some more features. Alright guys, so I have a tank and I have the device. Now you might be asking why I didn't put the tank directly on the device yet, and the reason why is because there is a trick to use Canthal temp control. And it's something that I actually learned from Benjamin over at Hohm, who was a ton of help, and I have to be honest, if it wasn't for his customer support, I'm not sure this device would be getting the review it's actually going to get. He was very helpful and he helped me through a lot of issues that I had at first, and once he helped me through it, it was very simple to get things going. So, when using Canthal temp control, the first thing you want to make sure is when you put on your device or your coil, if it's a new one or if you're putting it on for the first time, you want to make sure you put it on while the device is in sleep mode. Not necessarily powered off, but just make sure the screen is off. So what we'll do is put it back on up here. As we can see, the screen is off. And it's now on. So if we can see that, it should be reading at about 0.2, give or take. Reading at 0.23, which is pretty much average for the Z-Pal coils. But anyways, 0.23, it's now firing. If I had have done that without the screen being completely in sleep mode, and that doesn't mean darken like this, I mean completely in sleep mode, it actually wouldn't have fired right and it wouldn't have read it right. So make sure when you are putting a Canthal coil on this device, you have the device or the screen turned off just like this. Anyways, going back into the menu system, one thing I want to point out is the Insanity menu. To get the Insanity menu, you hold down the mode button, which is this one right here, along with the up and down button just right here. Together, Advanced Insanity menu. To scroll through, we just hit the up and down button. And again, I don't know why I'm getting such a bad... There we go. Okay, so firmware version, upgrade port. This is what I mentioned before. If you're going to upgrade it, it's a little tricky because you have to turn this on before you actually upgrade it. Now, it has to be plugged in as well. So if you're doing that, it'll say link to CPU, and it's now ready to be updated. We're going to go back in that. I'm just going to go back in the Insanity menu here, and we'll turn that off. Alright guys, we are back. I'm going to have to cycle through that menu again. So a little warning that I didn't actually know, and I just found out on video there. If I try and turn on the link to CPU or the actual upgrade port while it's not plugged in, it will actually freeze on me, and I had to remove the batteries themselves in order to actually get it to reset again. So here we are, we're back in the temp control wattage mode for Canthal. We're going to go back into the Insanity menu by hitting the up, down, and the mode button. Also, one thing I forgot to mention is the mode and the down button will lock in your resistance on the coil if you want to do that. But anyways, going back around here, we do have the update or the firmware version. We have the upgrade port, which we're not going to press again. We've learned our lesson. Screen rotation, if you want to use the screen rotation, you can go left or you can go right. So we'll go back to screen rotation, left or right. I want to keep it left, so I'm going to keep it there. To select it, it's always the power button or the fire button. Screen rotation, auto and TC control. This is one thing I don't like. I'm glad they included it for some people who will like it. But basically what the auto and TC control does, it will actually lower the wattage or the temperature depending on what mode you're in automatically as the battery starts draining. So that's something I'm not a big fan of myself personally. But if you do want to turn it on, you can. And it is there if the option presents itself. I think it's something like when it gets down to like 40%, it goes down to like 60 watts or something, or 45 watts or something. Anyways, I really wish my camera would fucking focus right now. But anyways, moving on, we have the FSK temp curve. And this is where you actually can do all your adjustments in the Canthal for finding out the perfect percentage for you for the device you're using. And we'll do this more in depth on the actual dry burn test video. But in the meantime, I wanted to show you what it looked like just up close so you could adjust it. Typically, I keep it around 37% on the Z-Pal Coral tank. But again, that's just my personal preference. You may have a different one and to each their own kind of thing. And again, you will have to play around with it a little bit. And depending on the temperature of the room, can actually affect the accuracy of the Canthal temp control. So just keep that in mind as well. Make sure you're trying to be in as close room temperature as you are, or as you can be. Try not to be outside when playing around with it. And if you are outside, you're going to have to adjust the FSK curve again because it's a different variable added in. Basically, actually, you know what? Matt from Suck My Mod did a very good video on the actual explanation of that. I'm going to leave the rest of that to him. And in the meantime, I think I'm going to end the up close section there, and we'll take it back up top. And I will tell you whether or not I recommend this. That's right, YouTube. We are back up top with the Hohm Record G2. And a few things I want to mention before we get to the actual finale sort of thing and whether or not I recommend this device. I will say this, in the time that I actually recorded the original video, which was the first two sections you already watched, and actually an alternate ending to this video, there's actually been an update. In fact, what happened was, long story short, I did the recording the one night. I decided to wait to do editing until the next day. And it turns out I got an email from Benjamin, who's my contact over at Hohm. He messaged me saying that there's been a new update and there's going to be a whole bunch of new changes and fixes in there. Now, most of these fixes are pretty small and not some big things that really affected my overall review, but there is one key thing to this whole story that kind of makes it just a little bit more relevant than what it would be, and that is the fact that they did do an update. This is actually, I think, their second or third update since I got this thing about a month and a half, 2 months ago, and I will say this, I'm very impressed with the amount of updates they have and the amount of fixes they've had on little small bugs, and you'll see what I mean when I read through this list. But another thing I'm going to mention is that I'm just going to read through the list of updates. I'm not actually going to show you the updates in this video. I'm going to do that in a separate video because I kind of think it warrants its own video in itself just by the updates. And I know I also promised you guys a separate video for the dry burn test. What I may do is combine them both into one video, kind of like a part 2 of this review, just going over the dry burn test and of course the updates. But in the meantime, one of the things I did want to comment on is the fact that it does seem like this device is being updated pretty regularly. And that's something that's got to be a big pro that I didn't mention before. If the company is taking the time to update a device on a regular basis, to me that's a huge win. Because unlike some devices where you buy the device, a month later you get an update and then you never hear from them again, I like the idea of having this stay relevant through updates. And it feels like it is. It feels like every time something gets found that's a little bug or whatever in the little software or in the chip itself, I should say, it does seem like they are focusing on fixing it. And again, to me, that's a big pro in my mind. If you're constantly upgrading your hardware, it makes it less of a chore having to go out and buy a new piece of hardware every time there's something new coming out. And this one feels like they're incorporating that in this device. So just something I wanted to make a note of really quickly. I will go through the list of updates now, and then I'll tell you at the end, after this is all said and done, whether or not I recommend this from my personal experience. So, the update version is 2.4.4. Again, I believe as of this recording, this is the most up-to-date software from what I could find. And here are the changes, okay? The battery percent integrates surface volt, amp drop, and increases battery reading irregularity sensitivity. The EPT evaluation lock and switching the EPT evaluation lock when switching and changing modes, the EPT evaluation lock when powered off and or batteries removed or changed, the EPT evaluation look when ADI removed and reattached, and again, I'm reading this word for word, so hopefully this makes sense to you guys. The resistance lock when switching and changing modes, the resistance locks when powered off and or batteries removed or changed, the resistance locks when ADI removed and reattached. The FSK temp curve sensitivity increased 1.5%. The screen now stays bright for 2 seconds longer. Honestly, not something I was really looking into too much. I found it would stay bright long enough for me, but I guess some people had some complaints about it, and they did address it in this recent update. And the last thing is when you reset the EPT and resistance valuation by hitting the fire button when the ADI is detached. So in other words, if you want to reset the EPT and the resistance, you can do so by removing the ADI off the device, hitting the fire button, and it then resets it when you put a new ADI on, or if you put the same ADI on, it should read it as a new coil. And what that means is this would be a similar comparison to what we've seen with the X Cube and a few other devices as well, where you see that in order to change the actual reading, you actually have to detach the atomizer or the tank or whatever it might be, the RDA, whatever it is, detach it, hit the fire button, and then it'll reset. If you don't hit the fire button, it will not reset, meaning if you put a brand new ADI on it and you haven't hit that reset button, it's not going to read properly. So just one thing to keep in mind, make sure you hit that fire button when you reset it. Those are the big changes here. So there is one more. It looks like if and or when you want to change tank, build, or coil, reset chip by pressing the fire button when no ADI is attached. Again, FSK chip will evaluate the new attached coil or wire. Now, this all happened right after Benjamin actually went on the PM EST review that he put out recently, and he kind of did these updates, and I'm thinking a lot of them ended up occurring from that actual visit with him, going over some little things that PM EST may have had issues with, and I think that, again, it shows that they're willing to commit to the hardware itself, and you're not going to be stuck buying new hardware every time you want to have a new feature changed. So I think in that sense, that's a pretty big pro in my mind. Now, of course, we already talked about the other pros and cons, and let's end the video off with my overall recommendation. Do I recommend buying this? And again, it goes back to the value of the device.
A lot of people are going to say, oh, 130 bucks for a device is just too much money to spend on a device. You know, I can get this device or that device for the same price or cheaper. And I think it goes back to not just, and I mentioned earlier, the quality of the hardware, which is phenomenal. It's a great quality hardware. I really enjoy the durability of it. I almost want to put it through the test on breaking mods, but I'm not willing to part with it, to be honest. And that leads me to my conclusion, and that is I really do like this device. I love how up-to-date they are on it. I love how thorough they have been with all their little tweaks and everything. Everything's just so small and so fine-tuned that they've done with this thing that I really have no issues with it so far. So with that being said, that will end the video. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, happy vaping, YouTube.